Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in Senior B English. We now turn in our MyPerspectives to Unit number 6 on page 676, Finding a Home, Nation, Exile, and Dominion. I want you to pay attention to your unit goals on 678 and your academic vocabulary for the informative text on 679. And now we will turn to the launch text on page 680, the text Home Away from Home. This selection is an example, I'm just reading with you now on 680, of an informative text, a type of writing in which the author examines concepts through the careful selection, organization, and analysis of information. You will write in this mode for the performance-based assessment at the end of this unit. Now, as we read this together, I want you to look at how information is shared. Mark the text to help you answer this question. How does the writer introduce and develop a thesis about changing perspectives on the idea of home? So now let's spend a few moments reading these 6 paragraphs. It's a real brief comment and yet I think powerful. This question of what does it mean to be dislocated and have to redefine the concept of home one more time.
Home away from home. Leaving one's home to live elsewhere is one of humanity's oldest stories. Ever since people first began to settle in small villages, some of us have been pulled in the opposite direction, drawn toward life in new lands. Sometimes we were fleeing danger. Sometimes, by moving, we faced new dangers. In all cases, our restlessness gave us new perspectives on the meaning of home. As Mark Twain wrote, broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. In the modern world, we are more mobile than ever. According to a United Nations report, there were nearly 191 million international immigrants worldwide in 2005. That represents about 3% of the world's population. Despite these massive numbers, each person's experience of immigration can still feel unique and often challenging. For example, new immigrants may struggle with language difficulties. Most people can speak and read the language of their country of origin. That sense of ease in a language may disappear in the adopted country. A language gap can make even ordinary chores a challenge. One might struggle to understand a receipt, to get on the right bus, or to read an ad. On a deeper level, language barriers may leave new immigrants feeling isolated, cut off from jobs, education, and even friendships. Culture shock is another hurdle that new immigrants may face. Culture shock is a feeling of disorientation or alienation when one encounters the customs of another society. It can range from discomfort with new foods to a sense that certain behaviors are inappropriate. For example, in the United States, it's considered proper to politely confront a coworker with whom one is having problems. Asking a superior to intercede may be seen as a breach of trust or an inability to handle one's own problems. By contrast, in Japan, people generally avoid direct confrontation. An unhappy employee may readily ask a superior to speak to a coworker on his or her behalf. Gestures, facial expressions, and greetings can also be culturally specific. For example, in the United States, it is considered normal to smile at or say hello to a stranger one passes on the sidewalk. However, in Russia, most people do not smile at or greet strangers. They reserve outward signs of friendliness for friends and family. Language and cultural barriers may make the prospect of feeling at home in a new country seem impossible to new immigrants. However, as the centuries have shown, human beings are resilient. We learn the languages of our adopted countries, often contributing words from the language we brought with us. We embrace or reshape the values of our adopted countries. Foods that were once foreign become part of the larger culture's culinary vocabulary. We build new senses of home. Perhaps, as our global mobility continues to increase, our sense of home will expand to include not just our immediate neighborhoods, but also the planet itself.
Let's turn now to analyze briefly. Notice this essay. Notice that we begin with the observation, leaving one's home to live elsewhere is one of humanity's oldest stories. And of course, as we've said many times in 303, we are the stories that we tell, the stories that we retell, the stories we accept. We're also the stories we reject. And of course, this first line will remind us that our most ancient stories, namely, of course, the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, are all about dislocation, right? That is to say, being away from one's home sometimes returning to one's home, sometimes not returning to one's home. And so this is going to be a text that will talk specifically about the challenges of what it means to leave one's home and to become an immigrant. Now, of course, we live today in a culture where this is a huge debate about people coming to America or not coming to America. Of course, we're a country of immigrants, so let's be clear on this. And to that degree, this topic is near and dear to all of our hearts, whether you've ever left the confines of the small community you live in. Inevitably, you will most likely have to leave the confines of the small community that you live in. And in that moment, you, of course, are migrating, that is to say, moving into another place. So this text is obviously going to speak to all of us, not just to those of us who have had the experience of migrating or immigrating elsewhere. The author will quote Twain early on from Innocents Abroad. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. An injunction for all of us to get out and see more and more of the world. Of course, the data then in paragraph 2 will be utilized. Now this is old data from 2005 and yet compelling data, the way that the world is growing more and more in terms of immigration. By paragraph number 3, we're going to be introduced to the 2 challenges that will be spoken of primarily for immigrants and new culture contact experiences. One, obviously, is language. We cannot help but applaud those who come to the United States and have to pick up the language English. I mean, those of us that have been learning it all our lives still report that we struggle at times with understanding how to use the language correctly. Of course, for somebody that's been immersed into the language, especially after a few years of a first language acquisition and then have to come into a second language or even a third language acquisition situation, we have to applaud those who are stand-up, courageous people willing to give that a try. The challenge of culture shock, starting in paragraph 4, then will be discussed. And several examples are given, one from Japan, one from Russia, pointing out the ways in which cultures are so different and so varied, culminating in paragraph 6 with an injunction, an idea that maybe in the end, because human beings are so resilient, that we're all going to find ways to create and build a new sense of home. Now, of course, an essay like this is going to need to be summarized on 682, but we're more interested in the prompt on 683. In what ways is home both a place and a state of mind? I'd like you to spend a few minutes writing about this as you begin to think about the readings that we will address now in Unit 6 as we move from the Victorian period up into the 20th century and then to the present day of the 21st century. So let's go to work now, Unit 6. Thank you.